Hey guys, Connor Richards of PokerNews here in Las Vegas, and this is Life Outside Poker. My guest for this episode is Hustler Casino Live co-owner Ryan Feldman, who got his start as an ESPN researcher before leaving ESPN and going on to run some of the biggest poker streams. We talked about running games with the likes of Dan Bilzerian and Neymar, and of course, we also talked about the infamous Jack forehand. Let's get into it. All right, Ryan, well, I appreciate you coming down here to do this interview. I'm excited to talk to you about a bunch of different things, growing live at the bike and then, turning Hustler Casino Live into the behemoth that we see today. But let's go back a little bit because we both studied journalism in college. I think you did broadcast journalism. So what got you interested in that?
Well, since I was a kid, I was always really into sports broadcasting. I wanted to be a play-by-play guy or a sports radio host. That was, I guess, what I wanted to do probably after I realized that I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, which I initially wanted to be, and then realized that wasn't realistic. So, yeah, that was like what I wanted to do in college and what I wanted to do for my profession. I was always a huge sports fan as a kid, so I was always, as a kid and older, the type where whatever I wanted to do, like that's what I wanted to do, and I wanted to remain focused on that and not have a job just to have a job. Like I said, I want to work in sports media. I'm only going to do things that relate to sports media. So yeah, I was a huge sports fan just forever. Even high school, I was doing sports things, and I was running March Madness brackets, and I was manager on my high school basketball team for 3 years. I broadcasted our high school football games the last 2 years in high school, and we actually won the state at the highest level in Pennsylvania my junior year, and I got to call the games. We were undefeated that year. So I was always into sports. I worked at a radio station where I started interning in high school that was owned by, I don't know if you'll know how much of a football fan you are, if you'll know who this is, but Merrill Reese, he's like a legendary broadcaster for the Philadelphia Eagles. And he owned a local radio station, and my mom had met him at Chamber of Commerce or some sort of networking event. And she connected me with him because she knew I wanted to work in sports broadcasting. And we had this senior project that we had to do. We had to pick something to do. I don't even know what the guidelines were, but what I decided I wanted to do is intern at this radio station and learn what it takes to be a sports broadcaster. So that's what I did for my senior project, and I got to kind of observe and learn about sports radio at this local station, and I did some jobs there. I was like a producer, so to speak, like a DJ for some of the shifts. I was an engineer where I would set up the equipment at like local high school basketball games. I did all types of stuff like that, and then I went to college at Temple University in Philly. Majored, like you said, in broadcasting communications. And so it was like there was journalism and then there was broadcasting. So I was more on the broadcasting side for my major. So I was more learning about the technical stuff, about production, all that type of stuff, as opposed to like writing, which I was always into writing as well, but that's just the path I went in college. And in college, I eventually started doing some jobs related to that too. So by, I want to say sophomore year maybe, I got a position as broadcasting the Temple women's basketball games. It was, I forget what it was called, but it was through Yahoo Sports, and it was this subscription thing. You could listen to different college games, and I did that. They were a pretty good team. They were coached by Dawn Staley, who's now the coach of South Carolina, that's undefeated this year. And I worked for this other website where I would do reports on basketball and football games at Temple and other teams in Philly. And so I got experience doing things in college. And then when I graduated college, I had to figure out, what I wanted to do. That's when I started applying to different radio stations, different TV stations, trying to find jobs that I wanted to get in sports broadcasting. I realized right away how hard it is to get a job at a news station as a sports anchor or something like that. Even in like the smallest towns, there's so much competition.
That's kind of surprising. You had so much experience, and even still, you found it difficult.
Yeah, but like I think. First of all, I think these days a lot of it is just like networking, right? It's just like who you know to get a job, and I think that that's the most important thing. And then there's also just like how you look, your voice, like things like that, you know? And there was just probably more qualified candidates, people that went to really good schools. Syracuse, you know, you go to Syracuse, you're going to have a huge edge, or some other schools like that too. Yeah, it was just hard to get a job. I realized that. I came close a couple times, but I then started my own website. I decided, you know what? I see guys like Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless and people like that on TV who were newspaper writers, and now they're on TV after being writers. So I said, maybe I can do that. Maybe I can become a writer, and then that could lead me to being on TV. So I started my own website. It was a college basketball NBA website. It was an NBA draft website. It was called The Hoops Report. And I had a friend who made websites, so he designed it for me for free. And I started writing my own articles on there to get like my work out there. Eventually, I hired interns, so to speak, who worked for free just to get, like once I built the website up, just to get their name out there so that they could write articles for me. I think I might have had like a friend or two that wrote for me as well at the beginning. And quickly, I used that to get media credentials at different games. So I would apply to, you know, some of them would say no, but most of them would say yes. So I would go, you know, get a media credential to a game at Rutgers or a game at, you know, even Duke eventually in North Carolina. I would go to Madison Square Garden. I would go to all the games in Philly. And I started getting into these events, these games, writing articles for my website there, meeting coaches, meeting different media people, starting to network. That's kind of like how I started. Jump the gun from your original question, but that's kind of how I started, and I started writing for newspapers as well and different websites. And I was like, all right, if I'm going to go cover this game and write for my website, I'll, you know, double down and also write for this newspaper and get paid for it. So I started doing stuff like that too.
Yeah, and you mentioned you got to go to all these cool stadiums and places. Definitely when I first got into journalism, the thing that I loved is just the media pass, the kind of access that you get with that. You get to go to backstage, you get to talk to people you'd otherwise never get to. Is that the same feeling that you got from being in media, was just getting all this crazy access?
Yeah, it was so cool because in one part of my mind, I knew that like I didn't belong compared to these other media people. I just ran a website that I created myself, right? But as time went on, I became friends with a lot of these media people, and I would see the same people different places, so they knew me, right? And then I started to feel like I did fit in. But yeah, I would be like, I mean, think about it. I'm right out of college, right? I'm working for myself, basically. I'm like 23 years old, and I'm at Madison Square Garden in the back tunnel there, you know, walking on the court, at the press conference. You know, I'm asking questions to Coach K, to Jim Calhoun, to Jim Boeheim, to guys like that. So it was actually really cool. And I was a huge college basketball fan. So as a fan, it's great too. You know, I look back at some of the players that I got to talk to back then. Kyrie Irving, Michael Beasley, just a million different big players these days. Derrick Rose, you know, these guys, OJ Mayo, that I would interview when they were huge prospects in college. And even at high school as well. And yeah, it was a great experience as a fan, as, you know, networker, as, you know, just getting into the industry. It was really cool to get that experience. And, you know, I would be able to create my own, like media, which is like, I would be able to create my own videos or, you know, podcasts or whatever it was back then that I was creating, because I was doing it for my own website. So if at some point I decided like I'm going to do video reports and put it on my website, so I did that, and now I have on-air experience on my own website, right? So I was doing all types of stuff like that, and you'd be able to Google me and see, you know, my name come up as a writer for these, you know, a big article about such and such, and it would get reposted on some other big college basketball website. So it was fun, and I got very close with Seth Davis, who's a big, I don't know if you know who that is, but he's a big college basketball writer and analyst. And
So not the poker player, Seth. Oh,
Seth Davies.
Yeah.
Close. But Seth Davis, he was always on like the pregame and halftime for the CBS college basketball games for the NCAA tournament. And he kind of mentored me and took me under his wings and was like the nicest guy ever. And that helped a lot early on. He got me a gig writing for the Sports Illustrated website one time. I got to get a credential to an NBA game, to the Magic Knicks game or Magic Sixers game, to write an article for SI.com. A lot of cool stuff that just those years out of college. I was making no money. Like whatever money I made, if anything, was either like getting spent to travel to cover these games, or I was dusting in poker.
Yeah. So if you have a media credential for like an NBA game, what sort of access does that get you? Do you get to go in the locker room?
Yeah.
What do you get?
Yeah, so I only have to do that one time back then. This was before I worked at ESPN. This was the early days where, I was just doing college basketball in high school. So that was a big deal when I did that. So I was writing an article on the history of the McDonald's All-American game. So I lived in Philly area, so I got a credential in Magic Sixers because that was like the game where it seemed like the most McDonald's All-Americans from both teams at the time. It was like J.J. Redick was there, I think, or maybe I'm getting the timing wrong, but Dwight Howard for sure, Thaddeus Young, bunch of Sixers players. So, I got to go in the locker room after the game. They're all like getting changed and all that stuff. There's other media people in there. I still remember Dwight Howard they lost, the Magic lost. So like Dwight Howard really didn't even want to talk. He had barely anything to say. He was like, I don't know, just like not in a good attitude because they lost. So that was disappointing. I remember Patrick Ewing, right? He was an assistant coach for the Magic at the time. And I was a Knicks fan as a kid when I lived in New Jersey, the John Starks, Patrick Ewing era. So Patrick Ewing was like a god to me, right? So I'm like, oh my God, it's Patrick Ewing. And he's a McDonald's All-American, so I wanted to interview him. So he comes to the locker room. I go up to him to ask him something. I didn't even get to ask him a question. And I was just like, hey, coach. And he's like, I'm not talking to anybody today. And I was just like, okay. Like, that was disappointing.
Yeah.
So that sucked. But, it was a cool experience just getting to talk to those players in the locker room. And, it was fun.
And, starting your own website, you were kind of on the cutting edge of that, because now that's pretty common is for people to self-publish with things like Substack and things like that. But back then it was probably a pretty new thing.
I think a lot of people had websites that were more like blogs, where mine, I tried to make it more like a, more organized website where it was just article after article and there's links on the side to different things. There was an NBA mock draft. But a lot of the pages were blogs back then, and there was a lot of guys that kind of were around my age, give or take, who were new in college basketball media, trying to work their way up. At the same time as me, I would talk to them all the time, see them at games, and it's kind of cool actually. Now I would see some of those guys that had like blogs and would write for different websites. Like one of them writes for ESPN.com now. One of them's either CBS or NBC Sports or something. Like just a few different like big entities that these guys work. So it was kind of cool to look back. And one thing I did back then that was cool is I tried to create this network, so to speak, like a new website. It was called Hoops Talk Live or something like that. And it was all these different college basketball media guys that I knew were like up and coming and whatnot. And I brought them together, whoever wanted to do it. And the idea was you host like a podcast, like a show, and different times of the day. So on Mondays, this one's at 11 a.m., this one's at 2 p.m. And the idea was eventually you have like coverage all day, every day of different like college basketball shows, kind of like an online radio show. And it lasted a few months, and there was a few shows that were consistent, a few that died down. It was cool while it lasted, but then it just kind of died off. But looking back, all these guys that are now working for ESPN and CBS and NBC, they were like hosting shows just for fun on this network. And we had some really cool interviews. Like I remember I had, Seth Davis for sure was on one of them. Reggie Jackson, the NBA player, that is, the guy's on the Thunder, and or I don't know what team he's on now. But when he was at Boston College, I had him on the show. I definitely had some coaches. I don't remember who, but that was kind of like a cool thing we did back then too. So it's fun to like look back at the old days and grinding, trying to make it in sports broadcasting.
So how did you get to working at ESPN? How'd that come about?
So I was doing all these different things. I was doing that. I was, hustling, just freelancing for different newspapers and whatnot. I ran a outdoor summer basketball league in my hometown. I was an assistant coach at like a high school basketball team. I was doing all these different things related to what I wanted to do. And at a certain point, and then I started playing more poker when Parks opened up in Pennsylvania, which was like the town over from where I grew up. Mm-hmm. And I lost money, and I probably was doing some sports betting back then too. Lost some money, and so I'm like, damn, I need to figure out my life. All this stuff's fun, but like I'm not making any money. I'm living at home. Like I've never had a real full-time job with benefits. Like what am I gonna do? So I ended up getting an opportunity to be an intern at CBS Sports in New York. And that was through Seth Davis. He hooked me up with that. I would go up to New York on the weekends and stay with my dad who lived up there. And I would just, I would get paid, but I would work in their research department, which I didn't know what it was at the time, but I got experience learning what that was. And I helped them with different things. And their research department meant something different than at ESPN really. But like one of the things I had to do was like on an NFL games, I'd get assigned one game with an editor we'd watch or with another guy we'd watch, and we'd have to like input in the computer the down and distance or, input, it was like something to do with like that yellow line, the magical yellow line in the field. So we were like in charge of that. And then college football, we'd have to like log the plays that happened, like every notable play, we'd have to write down the time code and what happened and give it to somebody so that they could get like replays ready and whatnot. So I went up, I interned, learned all this stuff about production. And then a few months later, I'm trying to figure out my life. Like, what am I going to do? Right. And I see on ESPN.com, I would always go occasionally to ESPN.com and other websites to look at their job search just to see if anything appealed to me. Right. I go in there one day, I look, and it says researcher. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's a job? Like I didn't even know. And I'm like, oh my God, I just got this experience working at CBS Sports. Like that's what I want to do. Like, yeah, it's not broadcasting, but I get to go work at ESPN, like get to do stats and numbers. That's so cool. Like I need this job, right? So I'm like, there's a million people going to apply for this. Like, how do I get it? So all I knew about research at ESPN back then was Howie Schwab. Do you know who that is?
No, I don't.
Okay. So Howie Schwab, who actually just passed away a few weeks ago, awesome guy. But he had a show on ESPN 20 plus years ago called Stump the Schwab. He was the head of the ESPN research department. He created it. He was the stats guy. And they had this show back then where contestants would come on and ask, or would try to like outduel him with like sports trivia. So they'd ask some question between Schwab and this contestant, and you win money if you can beat him, basically. And very few people did. So that's all I knew about ESPN research was Howie Schwab. I had met him once briefly at Madison Square Garden. I met him and Dick Vitale together, and just introduced myself, said hi. I added him on Facebook afterwards. That was like literally it, right? So now he's all I'm thinking about when I see researcher. So I send him a Facebook message, and I'm like, hey, Howie, you probably don't remember me. I met you at Madison Square Garden briefly with Dickie V. I've been interning at CBS Sports in the research department. Here's my other credentials. This is what I do. I just applied for this job as a researcher at ESPN. I think I'd be perfect. I really want it. Is there any way you could just put my resume in front of somebody to get me an interview? Like, that's it. He said, sure thing. Here's my email. Email me your resume, and I will send it to the right person. I was like, amazing, thank you. 3 weeks went by, I didn't hear anything. Then all of a sudden, 3 weeks later, I get a call. The person said, from ESPN, they said, hey, I got your resume from Howie Schwab. So I get the interview, and then it's like a process. It's like you do a phone interview, you do another phone interview, then you do like a trivia thing. It's like another interview. Then if they like you, they So these were like different levels. So I'd find out I'd pass each level, and I'm waiting for the call, and I'd find out. I'm like, oh my God, this is exciting, right?
Yeah.
Then I find out that I really passed it, and they're going to fly me up to the headquarters at ESPN to do an in-person interview. And I'm like, oh man, this is it. If I'm flying up there to meet people, like I'm getting this job. I'm not leaving there without getting this job. I know I'm going to get it. So it was the coolest thing ever. You know, it's funny side story. So I'm into poker back then, right? Not as much as now, but I was into it, right? And I remember this still. I was at the airport in Philly going to Hartford to fly there for my ESPN interview. And this is the funniest thing ever. I saw who I went up to on my same plane was Kathy Liebert. And I thought she was like a star back then. This is 2011. And I'm like, oh my God, Kathy Liebert, so nice to meet you. Like, she thought it was cool that I knew who she was. And I was like, it's just funny looking back that she was on my plane. She was probably going to Foxwoods for like some tournament or something. So anyway, so I go up, do the interview, talk to the different bosses and whatnot. It's an all-day thing. They go from this to this, meeting different people, interviews. And then, like a week later, I found out I got the job.
Wow.
So probably one of the coolest things ever is, to get that call, find out I got it. It's kind of like a dream job to work at ESPN,
Yeah, and so what was your experience there? How long were you there?
So I was there 5 years. 2011 I started. I was in Bristol till 2014. I did mostly college basketball, but you kind of do everything you do. Like during college basketball season, I was keyed in on that a lot, but an NBA draft as well, because that's what I wanted to do. But I did Sports Center. I did other shows. You kind of do everything. You do notes on everything. Amazing experience, especially the first year. It's surreal. You're walking around campus. You see Jerry Rice. You see Keyshawn Johnson. You see Snoop Dogg. You see, whoever. Like, you're like, whoa, Manny Pacquiao, right? And you're coming into work. It's like, wow, this is crazy. Really cool experience. Got really close with a couple guys. A couple of the anchors and analysts that worked there. It was fun. I think I did pretty well my job after a while. I realized, okay, college basketball, there's this other guy that's like ahead of me who's like their main guy. He does game day. Like, that's what I want to do. And I'm like, how am I ever going to do that if he's doing it? And then all of a sudden this opportunity comes up to be the NBA researcher, NBA Countdown in LA. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm an East Coast guy, but like, that would be kind of cool to move to LA. I don't know what I'm going to do living in Connecticut forever. Like, I have nothing going on here. All I was doing is my off days, I would just drive to Foxwoods and play poker for 2 days and then go right back to work. And that was like literally all I did. So I'm like, do I see myself living in Connecticut forever? I got nothing going on here. I'm literally playing poker and working, and that's it. Maybe I can start over, start fresh, be in LA. If the job doesn't work out for any reason, I'm in LA at least. There's so many opportunities there. Weather is nice. I'm stuck in Connecticut where I got to shovel ice off my car in the middle of the night, like just brutal, right? So I'm like, man, this is a cool opportunity. And NBA is way bigger than college basketball. Like, that would be sick to be an NBA Countdown. So maybe I'll get to travel, go to games, So I asked my manager, I said, hey, what are the chances I get this job? I apply for it. And he's like, if you want this, it's yours. Like, no one else is going to get it. And I'm like, oh, okay, amazing. So I applied for it. I got the job. I moved to LA. And then, that's kind of when everything started.
Yeah, so what did happen there? When did you decide, okay, I want to take poker more seriously? And why did the bite come to be?
So 2014, I moved out to LA. I immediately started playing a good amount of poker. The casinos are now much closer. There's more of them, right? There's like 5 major ones. And I was living at first in Silver Lake, which is like near downtown. So you could get to any of them like within 30 minutes or so. And so I started playing poker my off days, just like I was in Connecticut, but it was a lot easier now to play. And let's see. So then I had a friend who, a poker player from the East Coast, pretty good player who I was friends with, and he came out to visit like a few months later. And so this is now, so I moved out in October 2014. So now I'm living in that house in Silver Lake. So now it's like, I don't know what month, but a few months after I moved there, he comes out to visit in LA, and he ends up staying for like 3 months. Like, I told him he could stay as long as he wants. I didn't have any friends out there yet, really. Actually, my dad had moved out there a month after I moved out, so I had my dad out there, but that was it. I had like a cousin. And so, you know, he wanted to stay for a few months. So I was like, oh, this is fun. Like, we can play poker after work, you know, on my off days. Like, I'll go play poker with him. I have someone to hang out with, you know. So he would like just sleep like on my floor in my room, right, and just play poker. And so he, as he was out there, started talking about wanting to move to LA. And I was like, do it. Like, let's get a place. Like, I would rather live with this guy than live with, you know, these randoms that I met off Craigslist, you know. So I'm like, you should come out. We should get a place together. That'd be fun, you know. And he's like, okay. He's like, all right, after the World Series, like, I'll make a decision. I'll probably do it. I'm like, okay, cool. So he goes home, comes back for the World Series. He ends up final tabling the main.
Oh, wow.
So this, if you remember him, but it was a Joe McKean year. This guy, Patrick Chan, he ended up getting ninth. He busted the second hand of the final table. And so right after the main, we're talking, you know, so I helped him prepare for the whole main event. This was like November 9 back then. So like, you know, I helped him prepare in between. I cared more about it than he did, even though I had 0 piece. You know, I'm trying to help him prepare, do simulations, all this stuff, you know, get him sponsorship deals. And during that time, you know, a few of his friends, a couple that I knew, a couple that I didn't know, also were talking about moving to LA. So we started talking like, hey, after the final table, like, why don't we all just get a house together? So that's what we ended up doing. So after November 9, we get a house right after that in Pasadena. It's like 5 of us in this mansion. Started living together. So 4 poker players and me, right, who's working. And lived with them for like, I don't even know, like over a year. I can't remember exactly how much time, but like as time went on, I realized like, man, I'm jealous of these guys' lifestyle. Like these guys get to like go to sleep whenever they want, wake up whenever they want, decide if they want to play poker or not. They get to go out to the club if they want, you know. I got to wake up at 7 a.m. sometimes, you know. So I'm like, man, like this is brutal. So as time went on, when they lived there, I was getting more into poker because of them. I was playing more. I was learning more about poker from being around them, right? Like osmosis, because these are good players. And I was also realizing that, like, you know, do I want to work at ESPN forever, or do I want to try to play poker or do something else? So at that same time, we would play all over when I would be with them. We'd go to Bike, we'd go to Commerce, we'd go to Hollywood Park, wherever. And when we're playing a Bike, you know, I saw Live at the Bike there. So, you know, immediately I saw what it was. I got on the show a couple times. And then eventually I asked them, like, hey, do you guys need a broadcaster ever? Like, I would be down to do this. That'd be fun, because I wanted to be a broadcaster when I was younger. Like, this is, you know, it's poker. Like, this would be cool. So I volunteered one time. Ended up doing a few commentaries for them. Played a few times. So 2016, so I've been out there for like 2 years. You know, this is like the second NBA season that I'm out there. You know, we got to cover the NBA finals. It was like a lot of fun working on NBA, but outside of NBA wasn't as fun. Being in the office in the summer, covering baseball, tennis, whatever sports I'm not that interested in. That's when I was like, man, like I wish I was these guys, you know? So that year, 2016, the climate started changing in ESPN. It was more corporate. They had done a bunch of layoffs. They got rid of a bunch of the cool bosses. A bunch of like the things that they cared about changed. Like instead of, like I would get really good reports every year. I would get a raise. I'd get the top like rating for our evaluation. But this last year, like things changed. All of a sudden, they cared about different things. And my rating was lower. And I'm like, what the hell? Like literally my show producers are telling you that like I'm doing an amazing job, but yet they care about these other little things that don't matter. So I'm like, man, this just isn't fun anymore. It's changing. And I like what these guys are doing. Like, I wish I could go play poker with them. Like, after the NBA finals are over, like, I don't want to be trapped in this office during the summer. I want to go to the beach, you know? So I started thinking about it throughout that year. And, you know, it's a scary thing to do when you're working at kind of your dream job at ESPN. Yeah. What's my parents going to think when I tell them that I'm leaving ESPN to play poker? You know what I mean? But I got the courage to do it finally. And, you know, when I told my parents what I wanted to do, they accepted it. And they were like, you know what? You got to go after your dreams. If that's your dream, like, you only live once, you know, like, you might regret this if you don't try it. You have a great resume. Like, you can always get another great job in that industry. Just do it. So that was kind of cool to have them encourage me. After that season, after the NBA finals, after NBA draft, I, you know, was thinking about leaving. I went to the World Series, and actually, I'll tell you the story in a second. But because I don't know if I've told this story on a podcast, but it's interesting. But while I was at the World Series is when I actually quit, and I decided to leave ESPN finally and pursue poker. And that didn't go so well the first few months, but that's when Live at the Bike popped up right after that.
Well, let's hear that story
Okay.
then, yeah.
So 2016, I am at the World Series of Poker, okay? I went there, you know, all my friends are out there, you know, I go out, I play a couple events. Actually, let me backtrack first. Okay, so 2015, I wanted to play the World Series of Poker, okay? I hadn't played it before. There was a rule back then, and I think this rule probably still exists, but maybe they changed it somewhat. I'm not sure. No, actually, no, it wouldn't exist anymore because there's no ESPN anymore. But there was a rule back then that because of the ESPN contract, that anybody who worked at ESPN or even Disney or any of their like spouses or direct family members could not play any World Series of Poker event.
Wow.
Okay, so I was like, what is this? Like, that's crazy. Like, just because of the main events on ESPN, like, I can't play, you know, like the Colossus. Like, it makes no sense. So I emailed somebody from the World Series and asked about it as I wanted to challenge it. And he's like, well, this is like an old rule, you know, if you want, I went back and forth with him, and he's like, if you want to, like, you know, try to do something about it, like, email this guy that works, he's like a vice president at ESPN, who's in charge of this. He made the rule. He made us, you know, put this rule in. So I email him. So now I'm going back and forth, the guy from ESPN, the guy from the World Series of Poker. And finally, I got them both to agree that, okay, you can play, we'll make an exception, you can play as long as it's not an event that is broadcast at ESPN, which at the time was only the main event and the 100K one drop or the $1 million one drop, right? So I'm like, okay, sure. Mm-hmm. So I got them both to put it in writing. They said, if you have any problems, you can show this email. I went and played like 1 or 2 tournaments that summer. So 2016, I go to the World Series, same thing, I play a couple small ones, but I stayed out there for longer because I took time off from work because I knew I was about to leave. I just didn't care. I'm like, I'm just going to take like 2 or 3 weeks off, you know, use all my vacation time that I didn't use yet because I'm about to quit. So I might as well get paid for my vacation time since I'm going to leave after the vacation, you know. So I'm out there, and I was going to go back, and the main event was starting, okay? And I see all my friends playing the main, and I'm like, oh my God, I want to play this. And I'm like, I know that I'm not supposed to technically, but I'm about to quit. And I'm like, I'm so like jealous of these guys and the atmosphere and the Amazon room and all that, the music, you know. And I'm like, I want to play. So I ask, like, so first I text a bunch of people and I said, hey, if I decide to play, will you buy my action? So I sold like, I don't know, like 2/3 of my action or something like that, right? So I start asking like friends at the main about this. I remember the one person I remember asking, I remember Aaron Mermelstein. I was like asking him, and I was like, what should I do? Should I do this? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to get in trouble. Like, what if I get in trouble somehow and, like, you know, something happens, and then other people were like, well, what are they going to do? Like, if day 5 comes and or day 6 comes and they find out, like, you know, there's something they can do, you know, or I don't know. Some people were saying like, do it. Some people were saying, no, it's not worth it. And I was just like, you know, fuck it. I'm going to play. So I bought in, I played, you know, I was a little nervous that like I was doing something I wasn't supposed to, but what I decided was if I make it past a couple days, I'll just quit. So it'll be fine. Right. So day 1, I bag, you know, I don't remember the exact number, but a lot. It was a day off between day 1 and day 2, okay? I remember getting texts from people at ESPN that are like, oh, I saw you played, like, you bagged, like, that's so cool, like, good luck, whatever, you know? Day 2, crush it. Like, I think I had, like, 400K, which was a lot, and I think that's even more than maybe what it would be now, because I think maybe you started with less back then, but I don't remember. This is 2016. So I just know I was, like, top 30 or 40 in chips. And going into day 3. So there's a day in between day 2 and day 3. I wake up on the morning of day 3, and I have a, like, was it an email or text? I can't remember, from somebody from ESPN. And they're like, hey, like, you need to call us. Like, what's going on? Like, saw you're playing the World Series poker. Like, that's against the rules. And I'm like, what? So I go on a call, and it's like all these bosses, right? It's like a, you know, this serious meeting. And they're like, yeah, you have to make a decision. Like, you either have to withdraw from the tournament, or, you know, you might lose your job. And I'm just like, I'm not going to forfeit $10,000. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I was going to quit. Like, after this, I just hadn't done it yet. Sorry, I should have done it before, but, like, I was going to leave, like, you know, and I just didn't know this was going to be a big deal. Like, but I can't quit. I'm already in. And they're like, yeah, like, you know, this is a problem, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking in my head, like, man, this is so messed up. Like, yeah. I've done so much for this department. Like, I've crushed it for 5 years, you know, and, like, for them not to think about that, and just, it's basically the way they were saying it is almost like they wanted me to quit, right? So I'm like, you know what? Don't even worry about it. I'm quitting. I'm out. And I literally told them on the call that I'm quitting right there. So they're like, okay, no problem. Just send us a letter. Like, they didn't even, argue it or anything. So I emailed them a letter of resignation, and that was it. And now it's off my chest. I'm like, I'm good, right? Quit. We're good. So now it's that same morning, I believe, of day 3. So now I show up to day 3 to my table, you know, so the atmosphere, it's amazing. I remember I was on the phone, like, walking in with somebody. I had a lot of chips. I remember the one person I remember was at my table. The only person that had more chips than me at my table was Kenny Haller, who ended up making the final table that year. Excuse me. So I go to my table, and I go to my seat, and my chips aren't there. And I'm like, wait, what the hell? I'm like, what is this? So I'm on the phone with someone. I'm like, I got to go. So I'm like, looking around. I'm like, huh? There's a security guard right there. The security guard's like, hey, is this supposed to be your seat? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, come with me.
Oh, no.
So he walks me all the way across Amazon or whatever room it was. And we start walking, and then we meet someone else from the World Series, and I'm like nervous. I'm like, what is going on? We go into like a back hallway with Jack Effel, and he starts like yelling at me basically and telling me that, like, he's kicking me out of the tournament, and that he knows what I did, and that he knows that you know that you're not supposed to play because you work dizzy. And I was like, dude, I just quit. Like, I had already quit, but I just, like, hadn't put the resignation through, but, like, I just said it so, like, I could show you. And I was like, plus, you know, I talked to the guy from the World Series and from ESPN last year, and he said, you know, that it was fine. I can show you the letter. Now, I knew in my mind that he said anything but the main event, but, like, I'm like, come on, man. Like, I paid $10,000. You can't kick me out of the tournament. Like, I have 400,000 chips. Like, I was so mad. And he just didn't want to hear it. And he was like, can't do anything about it. And he just, like, walked away. And he was like, you want to email legal and, like, appeal it? Like, go ahead. But, like, you're out of the tournament. And they literally kicked me out of the tournament. And I was so devastated because not only did I pay $10,000, and now I'm going to have to refund everybody that bought action. So I'm out $10,000, which is a lot for me at the time. I had a healthy stack, which was probably worth, you know, at least $50K. And I was like, for sure going to cash. And now I still haven't cashed to the day, 8 years later. And I'm just like, this is crazy. So yeah. And I hadn't told that many people that day or for a while. But that was a brutal start to my, you know, poker career post ESPN. I'm like, Jesus, like, what a horrible start. That happens. I go back to LA. I start losing in cash games. And I start, like, reevaluating, like, why did I leave? Like, am I really made for poker.
That's crazy because you ended up quitting and then still couldn't play the tournament.
Yeah.
So
That was nuts.
that's brutal. But still, even with that, you decided to get more into poker. And then, so talk about the growth of Live at the Bike, because correct me if I'm wrong, but was that one of the first like poker streams?
Yeah, it was the first stream. So that started in 2005. So it existed for a while.
Wow. That's
it took a
pretty far
break.
back.
It came back on. But I came on board the end of 2016. So later that year is when I saw the opportunity. Their producer quit. I jumped on it. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I got the job, proposed a bunch of stuff to them that I wanted to do to kind of revamp what they were doing, believed that I could do it, and I became the producer and co-owner of the show end of 2016, beginning of 2017.
And one of the things that you're especially known for now is just the lineup building and putting together a collection of both poker pros and athletes and celebrities and just kind of making for an entertaining show. When did you realize you had a knack for that?
I don't know. I mean, I think I've always been decent at just like organizing, bringing people together in general. I think I've always been pretty good at like leadership related things. I've always had jobs related to that, coaching, and like a camp counselor, different things like over the years from when I was younger that I was in like student government in college, fraternity, executive board, just like things where you're in charge, have to make decisions and delegate and all of that. So I think that plays into it. But, as far as like putting lineups together, like I didn't know anything about how to put poker lineups together in games and anything like that. I just knew back then that from playing and from being in the community, I met a lot of people, other people play Live at the Bike and people at Commerce that I played with. And I had their numbers and I was just friends with these people. And I just was like, man, like, I feel like they're missing the boat. I think there's something here. And I would see other, poker shows and I'm like, why are they not doing this? Like, I think I can take them to the next level. I just believed that I had what it took. I don't know why, I just did. And then I also had these ideas from production, from working at ESPN. I'm like, man, they should do some of these things. And then, these kind of games, these kind of lineups. And I don't know, I just had a belief in myself that I could do it. And just did it right away. The first game we did was like a 25-50 game where they had like almost never done a 25-50 game before. And we had, a couple big names and we had a couple recreational players and it was like a huge success. And then, when I came on board, the first thing I did was like a month in was I got Doug Polk to come out when he was a big deal back then. It's when he was like starting to blow up. It was right after he won his bracelet. Upswing had just launched like the year before. And I proposed to him, like, let's do a Doug Polk week. He had never played, I don't believe he ever played on stream before at that time. On any show, I don't think. Or, no, maybe he played on one show, but not a stream. He played on that Super High Roller Bowl, I think, was like the year before. But no, like, live stream, So he comes out, he does a week. I think it was like a huge thing back then. We had like our biggest views every day. We had, back then before I came on, they had like 1,000 people watching every day. Now Doug comes on, we have 4,000, 5,000 people watching every day or more. And that was kind of the start of it, is just like, hey, look, these big ideas where we can bring these big names out and market. And just, if you market it the right way and get big names and big games, like people will watch.
And so after a few years of running things at Live at the Bike, you left and then started Hustler Casino Live. And we don't need to dwell on it too much, but yeah, what was it like leaving Live at the Bike, and what were the terms of that?
So like as time went, I've talked about this on a million podcasts, but yeah, as time went on, I just got more unhappy with the people I was working with. And, as that happened, I had become friendly with Nick, and Nick wanted to be involved with Live at the Bike. He just was like, I can help. Like, I'm a business guy. Like, I like poker. I just am bored. I want to put money in. I want to, do something with you guys. Like, it seems fun. There wasn't an opportunity, and then I would tell him all the frustrations I'd have about what we were doing, and he would see the things that we weren't doing, and they're like, why are you not? This can be so much bigger. And he's like, hey, like, if you ever get frustrated, want to walk away, let's go start our own, and we could probably get one of these LA casinos to take us on board, and we could just blow this up. Like, we could put money in, make a huge production, like, we could crush it. Eventually, I got the courage to do it. I walked away. immediately me and Nick started talking to all the other casinos, and then it took about a year after that before we ended up at Hustler.
And I think this was all like during COVID, is that right? How did that impact things?
Yeah, so I left initially Live the Bike April 2019. I stayed on board for like 5 months to help them and transition and, ease my way out. During that time, we were talking to other casinos, trying to, came really close to a couple of them in LA to getting it. Then kind of things slowed down the end of 2019. Then COVID hit in March of 2020. And that's when we were like, damn, like, what are we going to do? Now we can't talk to any casinos because they're closed down. So then like May or June of that year, a couple months later, Sean, the GM at Hustler, he sent a message to me and was like, hey, heard you're a free agent. Like, we want a streaming show here. Let's talk. Me and Nick went and talked literally the next day to him, and we knew right away this was the best fit.
And there have been some very entertaining streams over the year. One that sticks out is the Creator Night, where there was Phil Hellmuth, Ninja, Mr. Beast. And then recently you had some really big ones. There was the $1 Million Game, and then the Legends of the Felt with Jimmy Butler, Neymar, Ryan Garcia, all these huge names. What are the highlight moments that Hustler has done that stick out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the biggest highlights, all those things you just mentioned. I mean, first of all, being able to do $1 Million Game, 2 years now, where everybody buys in $1 million. I mean, that's something that really hasn't been done in poker. Now there's, Triton's done one thing, and, Poker Go did something kind of related. But more or less, there hasn't been something like that, especially 4 days of these games. And the size of the pots. I mean, we now have the biggest pot in the history of broadcast TV. And I think that's really cool. Of all these amazing moments, right? We look back at kids and we see like the Phil Ivey, Tom Dwan hand and, the Jamie Gold semi-far hand, all these hands, right? These are like legendary moments that seem bigger than reality, right? And now to think that some of these biggest moments are on me and Nick's show, our own show, like that's just weird. It's crazy. It's surreal to think that this thing that we just created and it's just our passion, that these are moments that are going to live forever in poker history. It's crazy. So $1 Million Game for sure, being able to pull that off and organize it, so much work, hard to do. Very proud of that. Being able to bring those big names in. But the Mr. Beast game and the Neymar game, I think are, to me, probably the coolest things that we've done, because, I'm a fan of a lot of these guys, and just in my mind, like the coolest thing that we could do in poker is to bring together a mix of celebrities in different genres with one or two poker players. Like that was always in my mind as this would be the coolest show ever and high stakes. So we finally got a chance to do it with Mr. Beast, Ninja, Keating, Hellmuth, Ludwig, right? All these guys. And it just went amazing. The action was insane. Everyone loved it. People talked about it forever. They're still talking about it, right? So that was like the coolest moment to me at the time of just seeing these guys show up and play and play so big for so long. They stayed for like 10, 11 hours. And then this one, really cool too. We've been trying to one up that for like 2 years, right? Like the way I operate is like once we do something, instantly in my mind, I'm thinking like, how do we top this, right? So, we had the Mr. Beast game. Instantly I'm thinking, how do we top this? Well, let's get another celebrity game like that. Well, it's going to be tough. It's so hard to get these guys together again. So then I said, what else can we do? $1 Million Game. No one's done that. Branding, $1 Million buy-in. Let's do it. That was the idea right away. Me and Nick talked about. We got that done. Did it. That game ended. We said, what do we do next? How do we top this? And I said, the only way we top this is to get bigger celebrities, right? Now, we want even bigger than what we had in that Neymar game, but some of those guys are the right, like what we had in mind. But there's even bigger that we have in mind for the future, like a huge celebrity game. But we thought, let's do something to top the Mr. Beast game. And I had this relationship with Neymar's friend Pedro, who played on the show, Pedro Velasco, for a few years now. We've always talked about getting Neymar here, and we finally were able to make it happen and find a date that he would do it. So became like a domino effect from there. He invited Jimmy Butler because they're friends, and then we just started inviting other people after that. But that was a very cool moment, just seeing all those guys show up and the excitement.
Yeah, I think you tweeted something afterwards. It was a pretty emotional tweet where you just talked about how much effort it took and just kind of it all paying off. So it was cool to see. And yeah, there was that hand with like 6 rivers between Neymar and Keating. I mean, you talked about legendary poker hands and ones that are remembered in history. That'll probably be one.
Yeah, that was very unique. You know, if I tell you a hand history of a bad beat, right? Like, or if you tell me, or any poker player that's like seen it all, right? There's nothing new. But that was actually a hand that no one's ever seen before. So we finally found a hand that if you tell that hand history to someone, they'd be like, oh, wait, that's new. I've never heard of that before.
It's true. Yeah, that was absolutely a memorable one. And so you talked about always wanting to, one up the last show. How can we improve on the last thing? What sort of room do you think there is for growth with how big Hustler is now and how extravagant of productions you've already put on? Do you think there's room to get bigger? Yeah,
I think there is. I mean, sure, in one, one thought, you could argue that we've tapped out, right? Like some of our viewership numbers in the regular games have kind of, hit a plateau for the most part, unless we get like special people in there. So I understand that perspective for sure, but I think there's definitely like more creative approach and different things that we're trying to do that we think will make us way bigger. And so there's a few big things that we're working on right now. One thing is we want to expand to other casinos in different locations. So get our product different places and have, more games throughout the week. Like we got Hustler here, we got this casino, that casino, right? Like just kind of a network of different shows. So that's kind of something that we're working on right now. Whether it be, national, international, things like that. We want to collaborate with different entities in poker. Like we have relationships with a lot of these big companies, production, online poker, all these sites. And that's one of the things I love the most about the World Series is just being able to see everybody out here that I don't get to see very often and network and talk about ideas and things like that. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to collaborate with other companies and put on some cool events. I think that's something we want to do as well. And then, there's bigger shows to do as well. Now there might not be something bigger than $1 million game as far as buy-in, right? Like I just don't think that if you do a $5 million buy-in, it's going to be any bigger really than doing $1 million buy-in game. But, there's bigger celebrity games. There's bigger names that we want to bring into poker. And I think we have an obligation to help grow poker. And me and Nick, we have a passion for that. We enjoy that. Like that's actually fun, And, we're going to continue to find ways, whether it's by getting bigger names onto our show to showcase them, whether it's to get our product on TV or, on Netflix or whatever it is. There's a lot of opportunities for us to do different things that I think will help grow poker. And, if any of our different media organizations, online poker sites, anything, if any of us, content creators do anything that's that big in the grand scheme of things, that just grows poker as a whole, it's good for all of us, right? So we're going to continue to try to do that and kind of come up with new ideas. And I get bored easily, so I'm not going to just sit back and let the shows roll out the same every single week. Like we're always going to have a few big things every year that we're doing.
And are there any big names that you've been looking at or dream guests that you'd like to see on the show?
I mean, I have dream guests in my mind. I don't know how realistic some of them are. I mean, the ones that are like the most realistic that we haven't got that we could get. Well, as far as poker pros, there's only one that we haven't gotten that's a big deal. That's Daniel Negreanu. And we ask him all the time. We joke about it. He's going to play eventually, I think. He hates traveling. He's not a big cash game guy. But me and Nick are really good friends with him. We talk to him out here. I think he'll come eventually. But as far as non-pros, I think, the first one that pops to my mind is Kevin Hart. He's always played a lot of poker.
Yeah.
He lives in LA. He plays in private games in LA. Just a massive name. He's just one of the most famous people in the world, right? So we'd love to get him someday if we can get the right group together and convince him to do it. For me, the one that I think would be one of the coolest to get, someone that doesn't really play poker, but I know he has in the past, is Justin Bieber. So
wow.
I think to me, and maybe I'm biased because I like his music, but I think he's like huge. I think he's like one of the, you could argue he's the biggest musician, and I think definitely he's like top 5, and I think he's generational, right? And I know he's more reserved now. He doesn't really do public things as much now, so it might be tough to ever get, but I have some connections to him. I know a couple of his friends, and he's just, I don't know how much interest he has in poker these days, but that's always going to be in the back of my mind as someone that would be cool to get. As far as athletes, like the number one probably for me at this point, coolest one to get that we haven't gotten would probably be Steph Curry. I know his brother very well, and then I know people that know Steph Curry well, other than his brother. Phil Hellmuth knows Steph, some other people. So I know that he knows how to play poker. I know he has some interest in it. They have a charity event every year, and again, he's so big. He's actually in Vegas right now, right? He's staying here. I could go maybe find him, but yeah, he's someone that I think would be really cool to have on the show one day.
Yeah, hey, get him for this podcast.
Yeah,
I'd love to talk to him. No, that's awesome. So going back to some of the biggest hands from Hustler Casino Live, of course, the biggest and most notorious is the Jack 4 hand. And, it's a couple years old at this point. This has been talked about to death. But just looking back on it, what do you think that hand did for Hustler Casino Live? Did you see it as, like you get all this publicity, or do you have to, do damage control and prove that your stream is safe? Or what was the impact of it for you?
Right. Well, definitely all of that. I mean, it got us publicity, but it's not necessarily the publicity that we wanted. And even if it somehow, gave us extra views and a bunch of positives out of it, looking back, still, if I had to choose, theoretically, like I wish it didn't happen. It wasn't a fun experience for me and Nick, for anyone around our show. There was just a lot of things being thrown out and rumors and accusations that weren't true and all of that. And, integrity things. And I mean, to me, like integrity, reputation is like the most important thing, especially in this industry. And so that really hurt for a lot of us. And, I think I took it way better than most of the other guys. But, yeah, I wish it never happened. And, like, yeah, again, there's a lot of like, we got a lot of extra views right away. I get that, and it was cool. And a lot of people are going to say, like, yeah, but you guys benefit off it. It's like, any publicity is good publicity, but it was a stressful time. And, but there were a lot of positives that came out from it. We made a lot of improvements to different security-related things that we were doing, and I'm glad that those things came to light so we could do that. We're we feel much safer in that regard now. Our protocols are great now. But I will say that, like, we've always been ahead of the curve in terms of any sort of, safety protocols. Now, at the time, looking back, could we have done more? Could we have done more before that than we had? Like, yeah, we realized that afterwards. But we still were, like, way ahead of the curve compared to any other poker show or stream, in terms of, like, phones and in terms of, like, just no electronics and different procedures we had, before the show. And all that. So, a lot of these other streams, like, weren't doing that stuff until they saw us do it, right? And then the Jack 4 thing happened, and then we started doing other things, and other people started doing other things. So, I think as a whole industry, it was a huge net positive. Yeah, it's a black eye at the time, but it made everybody realize they need to step up and have better policies. So, yeah, I think I wish it didn't happen, but there was definitely some good things that happened from it. And I wish that wasn't the thing that we were known for the most, right? Like, we've done so many cool things, but it's still probably the number one question I get when I see people in Vegas and they're like, did she do it? And I'm like, come on, man, I've had enough of this.
Yeah, I can understand why you'd want to focus on other things, but it was just such a big controversial thing. And also part of that was some fallout with Garrett, who doesn't play on the show anymore, and maybe some personal fallout with you and him. What's the status there? Any updates? No update.
I mean, I haven't talked to him since whatever the last incident was. I don't remember, but yeah, it sucks. We were pretty good friends at one time and used to hang out back in the day, and had a good business relationship as well. And I think that as time went on, it steered more towards business relationship than personal relationship, for whatever reason. I had some feelings about him towards the end about, how he interacted and, kind of just the way he did things that I didn't necessarily like. And I'm sure he felt the same way. But it just, none of that had to happen the way it did. I thought that he made a lot of mistakes, and he kind of showed that he's not, or that he's human, where like people thought that he was like this perfect person and a role model and all this stuff. And he kind of showed his true colors a lot. So that was kind of shocking. But, like we've always said, kind of like, nobody's bigger than the show. And we built this thing. We became number one in the streaming industry. We're doing this consistently. We've had all these big shows, big numbers, all the players, all that stuff. And we've had all these obstacles and players leave and things like that. But we're still here, right? We're still doing well. We're very proud of that, because at the beginning, we didn't know if that was going to be the case, right? Like, especially the Jack 4 thing was, I think, a little over a year into us being on the air, right? Like, we didn't know, hey, if we lose Garrett, like, what's going to happen to our show? We didn't know, right? But we went with what we believed was the right thing to do morally, and just what we believed in. We went forward and we said, all right, no Garrett, no Robbi. We're going to move forward. We're going to do different kinds of games now. We're going to build it a different way. And all of a sudden we had like all these big games with people are buying in deep, and we got $500,000 pots, and like we found new stars like Nick Airball, right? And I think over time, like, yeah, was there a lot of people that were unhappy? They were like, I want to watch Garrett. Sure. But I bet you a lot of those people still watched our show, right? Because they love poker, and they love watching the other players too, and they love the action. So, other people emerge as stars, and our show is just going to continue. We've had plenty of peaks and valleys, right? Like early this year, our show was struggling. It was kind of like bland. Nothing was going on. I mean, I was bored. The shows weren't exciting at all. It made me more motivated to figure out like what do we do next. But luckily, we rebounded. We ended up having a bunch of good shows with Brittany and Sashimi and Lingland and all of a sudden, like, we had all these big action shows again. And then we had the $1 million game, and obviously that was great. We had the Neymar game, and so we're great. We're here. We're not going anywhere. We're going to continue to come up with good things. We're going to continue to like bring in new players. Is anyone ever going to be as popular and as big as Garrett was? Maybe not, but, we've had Rampage, we've had Mariano. Rampage is pretty damn big, if you ask me. We've had Jungle Man. We've had like so many cool characters, Nick Airball. And I think that no matter what happens, the ups and downs, we're still going to continue to, be confident in what we're doing and be successful.
And how about Robbi? Do you have a relationship with her?
I mean, when I see her, I say hi, we hug. That's it. I mean, the funny thing is we've publicized our stance on that, but like, she's never even asked me to play on the show, which is kind of funny.
That is pretty funny. Cool. Well, yeah, as we wrap up here, I just have some more general things that I like to ask everyone. This is kind of a newer question I threw in here, but do you have a book that you would recommend to people?
No, because you know what? You'll laugh, but people out there are going to think I'm an idiot, but I literally have never read like a full real book before. Is that crazy?
That is pretty crazy.
39. I'm just not a book person. I don't have the patience to read books. Like, even when I was a kid, a book that would get assigned in school, I would just read like the Cliff Notes, the Spark Notes. I don't know. I just never been I know that's weird, but so if I recommended a book to you, I'd probably be lying.
No, that's fair. And, I think that's the way people are going. I think these days it's pretty common for people to not have read any books, but yeah. Okay, well, how about this one? What's something in the world that makes you hopeful?
That makes me hopeful? Fair. I think... So I think in the poker industry, like, it's easy for people on the outside to say that this is a bad industry. It's an industry of bad people, right? And certainly there are. There's a lot of bad people. There's a lot of people that steal money, that do bad things. There's money involved. Like, I get it. I've dealt with a lot of these people. But there's a lot of good people, right? there's a lot of really cool people out there that do really good things in the community. And I'll tell you one story when you just asked me that is kind of a microcosm of that I just saw the other day, okay? And I don't think this isn't out there, but I'll just say it anyway, and I don't think these people will get mad at me, but it is what it is. So that you know that kid Cody Daniels, obviously, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's very well publicized. He's got cancer. You know, who knows how long he's going to be with us. He's enjoying the ride. A lot of people gave him a good opportunity last summer. He's here again this summer. He played a couple events. He went deep in the Colossus, I believe. So we're out the other day, and we're at Aria, and one of the nights, and we're all like, I'm just there. I went out to dinner with Keating and Charlie Hook. You know who Charlie Hook is, and he was playing in the table one game, and me and Keating go down to the the high limit area, the high limit lounge. So we're down there afterwards, just hanging out. There's a lot of people in there. It was cool. Jason Tatum was in there from the Celtics. Like, you know, all these poker people are in there. It's like just cool atmosphere, saying hi to people. And then Cody comes in, and, you know, Keating starts talking to him, and Keating's being really nice to him. And I don't know how many times they've talked in the past or not. I'm not sure if they've even met before. But Keating starts talking to him, you know, really likes him. And he's like, hey, we're going to go over to table one. Like, come with me. Like, let's go. So me, him, and Cody, we go over to table one. We're hanging out. You know, there's a game going on. And Keating right away starts asking, he's like, so there's one seat open? Like, and right away I had a feeling that he's going to do something nice for Cody. You know, I just know how Keating is. Like he's like, Keating, people don't know, but he's the type of guy that like does a lot of nice things for people, just like off the grid, not trying to make it public or whatever. He just cares for people and likes, you know, whether it's money or anything else, just doing really nice things for people. Like, he cares about people, and it's cool. And so, you know, I wasn't sure if that means if he's asking if he wants to play or if he's going to like put Cody in or something. So we're just sitting there for a while and like talking. It's like me, Keating, Hook, Cody. I'm kind of like in the back. I'm like eating, but I'm hearing their conversation. Hook's playing. Keating and Cody are sitting there. And Hook asks him, and he asks Cody, so are you playing the main? And he's like, no, like, you know, I can't play the main. Like, you know, I'm not playing. And he's like, well, you should play. And he's like, yeah, I can't. You know, I'm not going to play a 10K. It's okay. I got to play last year, whatever. And he's like, well, I'll put you in. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah. He's like, you're in. And he's like, what? No, dude, don't do that. And he's like, yeah, man, you're in. Like, yeah, like, you're in. I'm putting you in. And Keating goes, well, I want half. He's like, well, I'm giving half. He's like, okay. And then they're like, we don't want any action. It's all your own action. We're just putting you in. And he was like so happy, right? I know he played last year already, so it's not the first time, but he was like so happy because he didn't expect that. And he's like smiling, and he's like shocked. He's like, what the hell is going on? Like, why am I blessed with all these opportunities? Like, you know? And, you know, they start talking. I hear them saying, like, look, if you do really well, if you win the main event, we'll put it in a fund. We'll use that money for other kids like you in the future to give them an opportunity to play. And I thought that was like the coolest thing. And then I saw a couple days later that night, he stayed till the middle of the night, and it must have been like 6 a.m. that, you know, Keating gave him some money to play for just, I don't know, I guess he free-rolled him, and he like won a big pot. I don't know what his net result was, but he gave him a chance to play 200, 400 in there as well. So I just think there's people in the community like that are with a lot of money. Like this is the kind of money that's a huge deal to the majority of the country, right? And they're doing things with that kind of money for people that you're changing lives and giving them opportunities to do things, right? And it puts a smile on his face he's going to remember forever. And I just think that's like the coolest thing. And so, you know, for every person that's like bad in this community, there's multiple people that are like great people they're nice people, some of the best people I've met, and people like that are doing, you know, really cool things for someone that's suffering. So I thought that was cool. No,
that's a super great story. Yeah. I didn't know Charlie Hook until I was covering a tournament that he was playing this summer.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt you. And Charlie said, he goes, I don't want you to tweet about this. You don't tell anyone. Like, I don't want publicity. He's like, I'm just doing it because I want to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm telling it, but whoever will hear this, but, you know, because I thought it was really cool. But there's people that do things because they want to be famous for doing things. And there's people like Charlie and Alan who do things because they're nice people.
Yeah, well, I was going to say this is a side of Alan that people don't really get to see on stream. And so that's
you saw that video that I think you guys posted where it was like in the morning after, I'm assuming it was probably that night after like a Bender session. No, I think it was a couple nights before. And he just started giving money to all the dealers.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, he didn't ask for that to be publicized, but like, I've heard he does that stuff all the time for dealers.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I can see why that would make you hopeful. The community does have kind of a bad reputation, but there's all sorts of these positive examples.
Look at the stuff that everyone did for Cody last year. Look, that other kid, Rob, that's like the opposite side, obviously, of like just the worst person. But, you know, when everyone thought it was real, like a bunch of people I knew came together and gave him way more than like he was even asking for. So again, the heart is there, the thoughtfulness is there, like people with money and opportunities want to help people that deserve it, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so looking back at your life and your trajectory and, you know, leaving an established company to do your own thing and building Hustler, what's a piece of advice that you'd give your younger self?
To give my younger self? Like something I'd want to do differently?
Yeah, or something you wish you would have known, maybe?
Let me think. Well, definitely to buy crypto early.
That's a good one.
That's a selfish one, but because even the times that I had it, like when I was younger, I just got rid of it right away, you know?
Yeah.
And so I didn't really get any of it till like the pandemic. But no, advice. I don't know, but I mean, I would give advice to like other people, if that helps, that from what I've gone through and all of that is just, if you want to do something and you believe that you can do it and that you're going to be good at it, like just stick with it no matter what. Don't give up, and you can do it. You just have to believe in yourself. You have to stay on the path and never go off that path. No matter what, just stay on that path. Do something related to what you're trying to do. Sacrifice for as many, all of your 20s, your early 30s, like however long it takes. Just sacrifice, network, grind, meet people. You don't have to get rich when you're 25 years old or whatever. Like, you just need to like be passionate about something, because to me, and this is just my opinion, I think that it's more valuable to be doing something you love than to be like making a bunch of money doing something you don't love, right? I just think you're going to be way happier with the first path. And what's more important in life than happiness, right? Like the reason we do anything is to be happy, right? Like we're only here for a certain amount of years. You make money to be happy. You do this job to be happy. You have kids to be happy, right? You travel to be happy. And that's really the ultimate goal. And so like do something that you're going to be happy with, waking up every day saying, I can't wait to do this job. I can't wait to do this. And whatever it takes for you to get to that path for what you want to do, just believe in yourself if you think you're going to be good at it, and just stick with it until you get what you want. And I think it's possible for anyone if you work hard enough and you believe in yourself.
Yeah, that is great advice. Is it the...
Are we still on?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, just one more question so we can just... All right, so last question here. One of the great things that I love about poker is just how many aspects of it are relatable to other parts of life, whether it's bankroll management or variance or just being disciplined. So with that in mind, what's your favorite life lesson that you think can be drawn from poker?
Favorite life lesson we drawn from poker. Let me think. Life lesson we draw from poker. I think I'm trying to think how to answer that. I mean, I can think of like what's the most important thing. I think of I think, I don't know if this answers your question, but I think the coolest thing about poker, in my opinion, is being able to bring all these different people together from different areas of success and meet them. And so you can compete and you can like try to win each other's money and all that, but at the same time, you can meet this guy and network with him, and he can give you a life-changing opportunity, or he can give you some life-changing advice that you wouldn't have this opportunity to be with this person any other time, right? You know what I mean? Like you could be at a poker table, and because it's poker, sitting next to you could be an NBA player, it could be a U.S. senator, it could be a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, it could be a billionaire, right? Or it could just be some degenerate that lives in Vegas, right? So you never know who that person's going to be. And if you seize that opportunity to just always be social and meet people and talk to this person, then you never know who that person is, right? Because anyone could look like anyone. And so you don't know when some guy who looks like an average person could be the person that ends up changing your life. And so I'd say, you asked me what's a life lesson from poker. I think that you should always have your eyes open and looking for opportunities. And, if you sit there and you're just like, right, like a lot of poker players just sit there, they're quiet, they got their headphones on, they're not talking, and they're just gonna be poker players forever if you're doing that. But, poker is kind of a pathway to other things if you want it to be. And so if you always are trying to meet people and talk to the people you're playing with and ask them questions, and you know what I mean? Like, I was at this charity poker tournament in Vegas during Super Bowl weekend, right? And this might seem obvious to some people, what I'm going to say, but it got through to me and I did it. And so I'm sitting at the table and I'm talking to this guy. I'm just being friendly like I usually am at the table, and I like talking. And this guy's telling me what he does. And he's like, listen, like he did something related to like trading stocks, right? And he's like, listen, like if I could give you any advice right now, like force you to buy 2 stocks. He's like, I'm telling you, there's 2 stocks you'll buy. If you just hold on to them forever, you'll change your life and leave money for your kids. And he said, Apple and NVIDIA. And this is like before NVIDIA blew up, right before it blew up. And, I ended up buying it, but I didn't buy it till like a month later when it was like, not too late because I'm still up a lot since then, but like would have made exponentially more if I listened to him that day. And it's like this guy who is obviously very successful in what he does is for no reason just passing along some advice because he just liked me and we're talking. And, if I jump on that could make me as much as I'm willing to put in. Like I can make millions if I put enough in, right? Off in the video. And it just shows that like you never know when you're going to get important life advice, or you're going to meet the right person that's going to lead you to something, or maybe you're going to meet your wife, right? Like you never know. And I think that's the cool thing about poker is that it kind of brings all these different kinds of people together in one setting where everybody just loves the game and you get to compete. And it doesn't matter how rich or how successful or what you look like or where you're from, That's what the World Series is, right?
Yep, that's a great answer. Well, Ryan, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you taking the time. It's been good talking to you.
Thanks, appreciate it. Thank you.